All right, and welcome back to another episode of Who's Lifting Today. I'm here with Renee Eckberg. We're going to be talking about strength training as you age. Is it different as you age? What are the benefits as you get older? Renee, thank you so much for being on the podcast.
Hi, Mark. Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, I'm excited for the conversation. Let me know, or let us know, what do you do? What are you about? And also maybe talk a little about what got you into strength training, and we can kind of go from there.
Sure. So yeah, I'm the owner, founder of Renee Eckberg Fitness. I am an online personal trainer, and I work from home. I have 4 kids. They're all adults. I have 3 grandkids, and I live in Wisconsin. So I have my Brewer shirt on because we're hoping for a win today.
Nice.
I am 51 years old. I started my strength training journey at 48 years old. So I always loved, even when I was in high school, which was in the 80s, weightlifting was not popular for girls at all. And I lifted a little bit for track. I was in a lot of sports, and I really loved it, but no one taught us anything. We just went up to the weight room and did some bench pressing, and that was about it. And then in college, I did a little bit more. Again, still did not learn much at all. Always was very curious about it. Did a lot of videos, a lot of cardio videos, and finally, probably about 5 or 6 years ago, I was doing some Beachbody videos, and there's one lifting video, and I had some small weights, and I realized I soon needed to buy some heavier dumbbells, and I fell in love with it. But the problem with that was it was the same program over and over and over. So I really needed to find something that was different. And that's when I hired my own personal trainer, strength training coach, who is Susan Niebergall. And she's been my coach for about 3.5 years now. So that's
nice. That's awesome.
Yeah, that's kind of my history in a nutshell for strength training.
Absolutely. So what you were talking about, how you kind of learned in high school and in college as well. Was there a gap between that period of time and you said kind of starting at 48?
Yes.
Was there training during that time, or was that different stuff?
Nope. That was just a lot of getting together with former athletes from my high school, playing a game of basketball every Monday night, or playing on the city softball league, or, different things like that. Really had no equipment at home whatsoever. Since I started strength training, not our entire basement, but my gym, my workplace is in the basement. I lift from home. So I have a squat rack, cable machine, dumbbells, kettlebells. I mean, pretty much a full gym down there with a matted floor. And then I do a lot of videos for my clients in my basement as well. So
that's awesome. That's absolutely.
It's very convenient. I have, our son, our 3rd child, is disabled. So he is full care, and he goes to a day center. But when he's home with me, I need to be home with him. And so it's really convenient to have my workplace and my workout place at home. So that's kind of why I started it at home. So
that's awesome. Yeah, there's a lot of benefits to having a gym at home for people who have the space and can invest in the stuff. I think that's awesome. So 48 years old, you kind of got more into strength training, hired a coach, etc.
Right.
What started that change from what you were doing before? What was the, you're 48 years old and you're like, okay, now I'm going to get really into this. What was kind of what created that turning point for you?
I think I was at that point where I always knew that I was strong, but I never knew how to get to build muscle. I didn't know anything about the nutrition end of it, about protein or, how to eat, anything like that. So when I started to do the videos with a little bit of lifting in there, it kind of brought back all those lifting that I had done for the sports, which wasn't a whole lot at all, but it was, oh yeah, I'm strong. This is pretty easy for me. I'm not coordinated. I can't do the cardio. I can't do the dancing, the different videos, that 2 left feet. So when it comes to strength training, and I don't have to learn a routine or anything, that automatically was easier for me to start off with. But then also just kind of a natural strength is a gift of mine. And even in junior high, I was kind of a tomboy and in the sports, and we would arm wrestle, and I could beat everyone in the class. I could beat all the boys, and I thought that was so cool. So that's kind of always been in just an interest of mine. But then while raising the kids, like I said, I played sports. We had our son who required a lot of care, but then he became stable in his health and went to school all the time. So really I was able to kind of get out, experience a few more things and try some different things. And I wanted to get back into fitness. And being that it was always an interest of mine, it was like, well, where can I go with this? What can I do? So when I hired a coach, honestly, at first, my thinking was, help me lose weight. Why can't I lose some weight? But then really the path that she took me on was, let's not worry about that. Let's worry about getting strong. Let's set some goals. What do you like to do? Well, I love chin-ups. I love to do chin-ups, push-ups, any kind of upper body strength. I love. So we set some goals, deadlift goals, different things like that. Chin-ups. I want to do 10 chin-ups. So we worked at that and did different exercises and lifts to get me there. And man, I think I got there within about 6 months of starting strength training. So that was pretty fun.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think you touched on two really good points there, as well as a lot of points, but there's two that I want to really focus on. Okay. The first is that, yes, if you're, people go into training to lose weight, that's a very common goal, of course. And if you want to move away from that, which is I work in a weight neutral fashion, so that's something that comes up a lot, is you need to replace it with something else. I think that's a really, really important thing to focus, is that you can't just you can't just not be anti-weight loss, or you can't just okay, I'm not going to do weight loss. Is we need something to fill that gap. We still need some kind of goal. Sounds like for you, that was chin-ups, pull-ups, deadlifts, and those are all great. And those are all a great replacement and really make the training worthwhile. And I think that's awesome. I think people need to find what is the thing they're going to do instead, as opposed to the thing that they're not doing. The second one I want to talk about is that you said 10 months, you gained a lot of strength in that time. I think that's really important for people to understand, is that at the beginning of strength training, you can gain a ton of strength really fast. And I think that's something, that isn't talked about enough, because really those first, even 3 months, but 6 months, 9 months, 10 months,
yes,
you gain a ton of strength, and it's so cool to see. And you go from a person who has never lifted a barbell in their life to potentially deadlifting 200 plus pounds. And I think that's a really cool experience to see. And it really breaks some limiting beliefs. I think that's really, really cool that you experience that as well. I would love to get more women's strength training in their 40s, 50s, and 60s. I work with a lot of women who are in their 50s and 60s, and they want to get stronger, and that's awesome. And I think there are some barriers that exist to that, either it being the fitness culture is still quite young. If you go into the gym, you're still getting a lot of young people. You might not see someone your age there. And a lot of people in their 40s and 50s have either stopped strength training, so they strength trained in the past and no longer do, or they just never have, and it's not on their radar at all. What would you recommend to get more women in their 40s, 50s, 60s, etc.? What advice would you say? How do we get them in the gym more, either at a home gym, whatever that might be, or how do we get them more involved in strength training? Because I feel that's, there are some barriers that exist to that. What do you recommend to overcome those barriers?
Oh, so I think there's a lot of, I think that there's an idea that if women start strength training, they're going to look a lot different, or they're going to get hurt, or they're going to bulk up and look like a man, or whatever. I think that there's a lot of different misconceptions out there. And now I found, since I started strength training, there's so many women that love it. And there's so many different avenues to take with it. And you don't have to do competitions. You don't have to do the strength training competitions or weightlifting competitions. I don't have any interest in that. I just love to see how many set a goal and work towards that strength training goal. But I think some of the barriers, if women have never done it and they're in their 40s and 50s, I was 48 when I started, so I didn't go to a gym. I've never really worked out in a gym. So maybe that's a little bit different, but
Sure.
if you're able, to do some of the things at home, to buy some equipment and to have a room or to try that at home, I mean, I think that's a great way to start.
Yeah, I agree. Gym's a little bit more comfortable, I think, is that unfortunately like weight rooms can be somewhat of a scary place. Yeah. I would love to see, I think gyms are trying to make them less scary, but I think, one of the challenges that comes up is just like when you go to a gym, a lot of people are like very young to start off with, or they're lifting like incredible amounts of weight, or at least what seems like almost like mythical weights at the time. And like as a new lifter, like that can seem pretty like daunting. So I think like I totally agree with you that like even just getting started at home, I think is like, it's a more comfortable environment. You're like more comfortable with like if you mess up, it's like it's not as, you're not in a public space messing up. So I totally agree with you that like maybe like training at home, at least to start, is perhaps like a way to break. And then as you feel more comfortable with your form, like maybe jump into a gym at that point, or like invest in a home gym. I think home gyms are great. Don't get me wrong. I think it's awesome. They're super convenient. Like if you have the space, that's awesome. I just don't want people picking home gyms because they're scared of the weight.
Oh, absolutely.
That I think is like the place that I would like to see, is that like if you want a home gym, like I'm building a home gym, like I'm gonna be working at a home soon, and I think they're absolutely great. I just want people to like have the choice of either or, not like the gym is scary, so I'm gonna like buy all the equipment instead. 100%. And then go from there. So you train people, like I don't know if you train like mostly older women. Feel free to clarify that for me.
Right now, my clients are all in their 40s and 50s. Mm-hmm. I have had clients in their 20s and 60s as well, but right now they're in their 40s and 50s. So,
yeah, absolutely. And what I would like to ask is, is the strength training? So first of all, what is similar? I think like that's important to talk about as well, or also what is different? Like, is training a 50-year-old woman different than training a 21-year-old woman? Are there things, and then we can speak in like generalities here, like, are there big differences that exist there? Are there things that are the same? Like, does the training look different for those who are, 40s, 50s, 60s, et cetera?
Well, basically the lifts are all going to be the same. I don't change things up for clients just because they may be in their 50s. Now, if they're just starting, I'm obviously not. I'm going to start them out with some maybe some functional things, and it depends what their goals are. I mean, I have some clients whose goal is to be able to play on the floor with their grandkids in 10 years, or now if they can't do that, well, then we're going to work on some squats, and we're going to work on some balance things. We're going to, if you want to go outside and run with your kids or grandkids and play sports with them, that's going to look a little different than if someone's, wants to compete, obviously, or something like that. But basically, there's a lot of, I have a lot of clients that have done sports in the past. So they want to get back into it. They're like, how can I get back in shape? And how does that involve lifting? And what can I do? And how can I start? Well, let's start with, where are you at right now? What have you done? What's available to you? And what do you enjoy? I mean, there's certain things, if they really, have a limited range of motion, or something hurts or something, when you're 55, that's going to be different than when you're 21. And I'm 51, and I don't have any health concerns, and I don't have any injuries, but I definitely notice cranky shoulders, cranky elbows that I didn't have when I started strength training. So I'm sure, when you're 21, I can imagine, I don't even remember hardly being, that's 30 years ago for me. So probably having more energy and maybe being more flexible. But again, that all depends where you're at and what you've been doing, and if you've been strength training at all. So.
Yeah, so it sounds like it'd be pretty specific to the person. That like being 51 doesn't inherently change the program. No. It just might increase the chances that there are mobility or previous injuries as an example. But if you don't have those, like really your training as a 51-year-old doesn't, the lifts are going to be the same. If you're a beginner, like a lot of the beginner exercises are going to be the same.
Right.
That and then what sounds like what you're saying is that like maybe the goals are going to be different. Whereas, and this is what I've noticed too with like the women that I've worked with in their 50s and 60s, that like, yes, they want to be strong, but why they want to be strong tends to be a little bit different.
Exactly.
Obviously. That like they want to be strong so they can go skiing with their grandkids or go on hikes, or they want to be independent for longer periods of time.
Exactly.
That like, yes, it'd be cool to deadlift 200 pounds, but it's not so much to like, no, it's not like necessarily about like the lift itself. It's more about like what the strength training gives to their quality of life and like what they can do.
Exactly.
So that's like what and I totally agree with you there. And that, like kind of like what you mentioned before, that like, it's not necessarily different unless like you come from like a mobility challenge or like an injury challenge. But that would also be true for someone who's like, if you're 21 and you have like an injury or mobility challenge,
yes, you could.
That like, it's not really about the age. It's more about like the situation of the person. So like, no, I totally agree with you there. Mm-hmm. What is, the number one tip that you would give people? Like they want to get into strength training. They're 50-year-old woman. She wants to get into strength training. She's new to it or hasn't done it in a long time. Maybe she did it in her 20s, etc. And she wants to get back into it, but she wants to start off on the right foot. Mm-hmm. What is kind of like the number one tip that you've noticed that you have been giving to a lot of people that would help her to get into that journey? Because I think like we can always talk about like what training looks like and kind of go from there. And I think it was Sohi Fit who put this up, is like most people don't train at all. So like that's the like that to me is like the big barrier that like I want to overcome, is like I want to get you in the game. So like what is the number one thing that you've noticed that really helps, like let's say a 50-year-old woman like get into strength training just to start off with?
Yeah, I think just to start off with, just learning the basic lifts and learning it with correct form. Okay. It can be so challenging if you're doing a lift and you don't know what to do. With my clients, we start really slow. We start very basic, so that I don't want it to become intimidating. I have them video their lifts for me so that I can watch them, because right now all my clients are online. So we start with some very basic things, and to have them know the correct form on that, and to just start slow and not to throw a whole bunch of different things at them. So just some real basic lifts. And again, if you're starting at home, you can start with some dumbbells, or if you're starting in the gym, just becoming familiar with, the barbell. And, even for myself, I didn't know, I think it was 6 or 8 months, I didn't even realize that different barbells there were different sizes and weighed different amounts. I mean, there's so much to learn, and it can be so intimidating if you're 50 years old and you're just starting. You don't really need to know all those little specific things. Just get started. But I was lifting. I made a trip out to Washington, D.C. to lift with my coach. And she was spotting me on a bench press, and I couldn't bench what I normally benched at home. And then she started asking me, well, how much does your bar weigh at home? And I'm like, I don't know.
Right.
It weighs 45. Or I think I don't know. And so I got home and I had a 35 pound.
Oh, okay. You had the smaller version. Yeah,
I did. So, I mean, there's no reason to be embarrassed. There's no reason to really worry about that. It's just learning the basics at first and jumping in and trying some real basic lifts, I think.
Yeah, I 100% agree. And I think like with anything, it's a learning process. Mm-hmm. I think especially for strength training, I think that's one of the major barriers that exist in general, is that like, unlike running, you put on your running shoes, you use the treadmill, you go for a ride. Like it's pretty obvious like how to start. Like obviously there's more technique beyond that, but that like to get into running has like a low knowledge barrier. And so like that makes it more accessible, as opposed to strength training, where like strength training, like you have to learn all these things. And what I would say is that like that is part of the learning process. You don't need to know it all out of the gate.
Right.
Basic movements are fine and will actually last like probably, I was deadlifting 6 years ago and I will deadlift now. Like that is like, there's a lot of basics that will like translate later in life, but that you don't need to be perfect. None of us were. like it's okay that you don't know these things, and that like seeking help, there's nothing like wrong with that. But understand that there's going to be some learning that exists. So I think that's like really good to point out. And the videos I think are really helpful as well. And I think when we say that, like, we're not looking for Instagram worthy, perfect lighting.
No.
The form is amazing. Like, and I think like, this is just a tool that we use to assess form, especially in the online space that but we're not looking for anything like amazing. Like, we're not looking for like the perfect video or And
my concern is always a lot of times when I watch people lift, I want to make sure that they're bracing their shoulders back, that they know what that means. What does that feel like? What is it? Take your shoulder blades, pull them back and down like you're putting them in your back pockets. That's what bracing your shoulders. That's how you should start every lift. You don't need to do just an ab day, to work your core. Let's work your core with every single lift that you do. Let's learn what bracing really means, and let's learn what, all these terms mean, and then incorporate that into every lift that you do. It's really
No, I totally agree. Form's a big part of it. And like, that's like a big part of the learning process with all the different movements. So I think that that's great. Where is the best place people can find you if they have more questions, if they want to learn more about what you do? Like, where's kind of the best places to reach out?
Instagram is where I'm at most of the time, and that's under Renee Eckberg Fitness. It's all E's. And I'm also on Facebook. It's under Renee Eckberg Fitness as well. Same with LinkedIn, Twitter, and then I also have a website, reneeeckbergfitness.com. So if you can remember my name, then it's pretty easy.
Awesome. Listen, I really appreciate your time today. Thank you so much for being on the podcast. And thanks everyone else. Yeah, of course. And thanks everyone for listening to an episode of Who's Lifting Today.